welcome Carl Grady.
Hello.
Thank you, Fallon. We are in for a treat today because Heather is going to take that first big step in the Toastmasters journey. She is giving her icebreaker speech, #1 today.
#1.
Yes. I think it's one of the best speeches, perhaps not from the speaker's perspective, but from the club members, we've seen some great speeches. One of the cool things about the icebreaker is you're not having to worry about how your speech is organized. There's no project goal to have vocal variety. You don't have to worry about your gestures. It's just go out, and the goal is get up and talk in front of the crowd. Find out what you're good at, what you can work on. And from the club's perspective, it lets us get to know Heather today a little bit better and find out what does she like to do, maybe outside of work. What kind of a person is she? There is no title for this speech, so we're just going to call it Untitled Piece of Speechcraft. But the teaser here is that everything is sort of linked by water. So I'll leave you with that teaser, and please help me welcome Heather to the lectern for Untitled #1.
All right, Heather.
4 to 6 minutes. 4 to 6 minutes.
4 to 6? 4 to 6?
Hi,
What
I
about-
this is heaven. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. For those of you I haven't met, there are a couple around here. My name is Heather Dziedzic, and I went with the Mayflowers theme as well, not the ship. So I was really glad you didn't go any further down that road because I was not prepared for a ship-themed speech today. So I went with the Mayflowers theme, except I went on the water side of that, meaning the precursor to those Mayflowers, April showers. And I am a sucker for showers, and mainly thunderstorms. I like the earth-shaking, window-rattling thunderstorms. And I used to spend hours and hours waiting and waiting and watching and hoping as a young child that I would see a thunderstorm roll through. Now thankfully I grew up in South Haven, Michigan, which a lot of consumers people are very familiar with. It's a beautiful little tiny town on the west side of the state. And the good thing that that tiny town provided was beaches and lakes for days. So you could sit on the beach and watch a thunderstorm roll in for hours and hours and hours. And that's what I used to do. I would just sit there. And I didn't realize until later in life, maybe in my mid-college years, how impactful my water, or the water around my life was. I surrounded by Great Lakes. I grew up on Lake Michigan, loved thunderstorms, and didn't realize until later that water was a huge influence in my life. So when I was a child, I spent all of the summers playing at the lake. We used to go through the sprinklers and the neighborhood pools. And one summer I did the requisite swim lessons through the YMCA, and I remember standing on the edge of an indoor pool and telling my instructor, I'm going to join the Sea Dragons. And the Sea Dragons was our local swim team, and I remember to this day that instructor kind of looked down at me like, yeah, sure you are, yeah, and kind of giggled, and that stuck in my brain, and I thought, you know what, I am. And the next time the little tryout season started, I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I joined the Sea Dragons, and I was a swimmer. And so I swam through middle school, and I swam through high school, and I was there every day, every time of the year. I didn't just do the season thing. So when I was about 7, I started 7 or 8, and I went all the way through high school. And I'm sure that my mother was sick of having humid bathrooms, drying towels, and swimsuits and goggles hanging everywhere. And I remember as a high school student running out from the pool, out to the car as fast as I could. And the goal was to get there before your hair turned to icicles. And because our women's swim team was in the wintertime. So after all of those years, about a decade of swimming, I earned a scholarship. So I was able to swim in college as a varsity athlete. And I did it for my freshman year in college. And then I decided I was going to study abroad. I use air quotes because my abroad was Arizona. If I would have been smarter, I would have chosen France or Australia or something, but I was able to go to this really cool program called the Biosphere. It's not the Biodome, I wasn't locked in there, but I spent a semester out in the middle of the desert, as far away from water as I'd ever been. And I bring that up because it meant that in spring, when I was abroad, I missed an entire season of training for swimming. I'm a fairly competitive person. which means that I was behind the curve when it came back for fall season. So rather than spending the time clawing my way back into a competitive position, I would simply switch sports. Well, I went to the University of Notre Dame, and that's a Division I school, and you can't just switch sports, right? You can't just, oh, I'm gonna play, football or basketball or whatever. And so I did actually switch sports. Thanks to Title IX, there was a new sport called women's crew, and they were recruiting novice athletes for this new sport, fill a team. So once again, I found myself on the edge of a lake, but at Notre Dame, it's in the middle of campus, so it's more like a pond. They called it St. Mary's Lake, and that's where they did the training. And I spent the next 3 years of college rowing crew, and it was an excellent experience. And I was still on the water, except I was on top of it instead of swimming through it. Now I could probably stop my speech there, and you guys would all sufficiently agree that my life has been fairly impacted by water. I grew up on the water, I swam, I was a crew boat person, and I would leave out a big portion of my life, and that is my career. Now, I grew up in the Midwest, and some of you may remember that there was a SeaWorld in Ohio, and my family used to take me there every summer. And from then on, I thought I was going to be a Shamu trainer. I was going to jump off the nose of a whale, and that was going to be my job. And I consider myself lucky because I thought for sure from day one I was going to be a Shamu trainer. And I found out later that meant that I was going to be a marine biologist. And so the last 10 years of my life, I have worked as a marine biologist. Never got to jump off the nose of Shamu, but I did get to swim with whale sharks. I got to swim with all sorts of other marine life, and I spent 10 years prior to coming to consumers working in the oceans doing marine biology. And now I find myself back in the middle of the mitten, surrounded by water once again, and consumers here, I'm in our environmental department, and I work in our land and water section, and I work to preserve our Great Lakes and all of the other water resources here in the state, making sure that we're interacting with our fish and aquatic resources in the way that we should. And so I find that my life has not only been influenced by, shaped by, but has kind of mimicked water. And I've been able to flow and change and move with it, and been all over the nation and careers doing all sorts of different things. So definitely influenced by water. Thank you.
For our